Hey everybody, it's Jaida, and this week I'm going to talk about some best practices for group communication. I know that oftentimes the hardest part of a group project isn't even the project itself, it's being able to coordinate and communicate with your fellow group members. So hopefully you can use some of the tips in this video to make that a little bit easier. First off, there are two parts to communication. The first being you understanding everyone else in your group, and the second, which is often a little more overlooked, is them being able to understand you. So the first step to good communication means getting everybody on the same page at the very beginning of your group project. Hubstaff blog suggests creating a communication manifesto at the very beginning of your project so that expectations for the group are clearly set and people have procedures to follow that are conducive to group communication. This largely eliminates any tension or cause for disagreements if everything is settled outright. So you can see we're looking at a group right now that might have some issues with communication. You can see even Mia here is saying, when is our group meeting? When are we supposed to have our weekly meeting? People are confused about their roles, and this is the type of stuff that would be sorted out if they did a communication manifesto at the very beginning of their project. So with your manifestos, you should be covering topics like what tools should you be using to share specific types of information? Obviously, if you're using Ensightful, you're able to utilize your channels and your direct messages, but even now, since it's harder to meet face-to-face if you're working in a group project, really utilizing various digital tools to help you connect with people in your team across time zones, across geographical differences, is really important. You should also be discussing what channels you should be using for what type of work, maybe setting up the channels ahead of time. Maybe there's one for design, maybe there's going to be one for anything that is written, there's going to be a general chat, and just being able to decide who is going to be in those channels, when those channels are going to be used, and how quickly or how attentive you should be in those channels. So how quickly should you be responding to questions? So that's super important to sort of go over with your team at the very beginning so nobody is confused. Another thing is to see how often your group should have check-ins or bi-weekly wrap-ups or really just anything where your group touches base. So holding effective meetings is a really big part of that. To hold an effective meeting, you need to be setting a time limit. You need to make sure you're focused and on track by using a meeting agenda and taking notes. So by using a meeting agenda, everybody knows what they will be discussing, they're able to prepare ahead of time, and then by taking notes in the meeting, you're able to make sure that your meeting was useful and that people remember what was said outside of the meeting so that you can use it going forward. Another really big part of group communication is misunderstandings, and more importantly, being able to clear up those misunderstandings. So remembering the two parts of communication that we mentioned earlier, you're only communicating if you understand your group members and they understand you. So obviously, occasional misunderstandings are a big part of group work, but if you frequently find that you're saying one thing and your group hears another, there's probably an underlying issue and there might need to be some things that you adjust in your communication style. There might be certain barriers to effective communication. It could be language or cultural misunderstandings, so those are super important to keep in mind at the entirety of your group project. So in order to sort of correct misunderstandings or reduce the amount of misunderstandings that you have, you can see with this team here is that Monty here, the guy I'm logged in as, says, Mason, you designed the infographics wrong. I told you to use the design template in the Files tab. Now, this misunderstanding might have had to do with either Mason not being able to understand Monty or Monty not being able to give correct directions. But the important thing here is moving forward from it. So in order to move forward from misunderstandings and to sort them out, you might want to work on the way you give instructions for tasks and projects. It's super important to remember your tone when communicating with group members, especially over text, where things can be easily misinterpreted. So in this case, Monty could have used more inclusive language to avoid blaming people, because when people are blamed, they get defensive and they're a lot less likely to help you out. So you can do this by incorporating terms like we and I and speaking from your own experience, rather than using terms like you, which might make people feel a little bit attacked. So rather than Monty addressing the issue by saying, Mason, you did this wrong, I told you to do this. Monty could be a little more inclusive with his language and try to work with Mason on this issue by saying, I think that we should work towards this goal, or I think that we might want to work on this, rather than taking this approach, so that everyone is clearly understanding they're on the same page, but nobody is directly blamed for something. You can also get to the root of misunderstandings by asking questions. So in the case of Monty, maybe Monty has multiple misunderstandings. He's a little frustrated with how he's giving directions, and he doesn't understand why people aren't paying attention to him or listening to him. He could approach this by saying, I don't think I explained myself well. What did you hear? And getting the group members to repeat back to him what they understood his directions to be. So you can clear up communication issues way before people actually start doing the wrong thing and putting effort into something that could be completely wrong. On the flip side, if you are confused by directions that you're receiving, it is really helpful to confirm instructions by giving an example of what you think that your teammate is trying to communicate. So if Monty, for example, said, I want the infographics like this, Mason could perhaps pull up a drawing or say something that along the lines of, oh, so you're saying this, would you like to see something like this? And just giving him an example of what he thinks Monty wants to see. And there, people can make adjustments or sort of redirect before people get started on the actual project. And yeah, that's a lot of tips. We're going to link more resources below if you guys are interested in improving your communication style in groups. But yeah, we will be linking more resources down below if you guys are interested in improving your communication style in your group projects. But that's pretty much everything we have for today. Thanks, bye.